everyone. I'm here back with Paola DeCicco.
Hello.
Thanks again so much for taking the time.
You're very welcome.
And we're going to talk today about common food allergens and the importance of, I know when I started with you many years ago, one of the first things was recommended was to eliminate all these things from my diet, which can be overwhelming for some people. Mm-hmm. But I really want to give everybody a clear understanding of why it's so important. So what would be your first takeaway with regards to eliminating them?
So as we touched upon last week, there's a big difference between an allergy and an intolerance. So the allergy is really easy to identify. It's the kid who touches the shrimp and, they need their EpiPen or their Benadryl. We're talking about intolerances, which are foods that you can be eating every day from a very young age, where there's no noticeable acute response, but that causes some kind of low-grade inflammatory process that can be a problem either in joint pain or headaches or IBS or what have you. So I agree with Carolyn that it can be very overwhelming because a lot of these foods can be healthy foods. But one step is that I will talk to patients about the top 4. So the top 4 are the most common food intolerances, which are gluten that we talked about last week, dairy, eggs, and soy. I find that those are the top 4. And so if you've identified that gluten is part of the problem, but not all of the problem, then it might be in combination with one of these other foods. And so if you feel ready for it, you can try tackling a 4-week elimination diet where you take out these foods, find the appropriate nutrient replacements, and then see how your symptoms do at the end of the 4 weeks, and then reintroduce one of the foods at a time to then see which one or which ones will trigger your symptoms, and that will help align you to identifying other food intolerances.
Right, and bringing them back only like for each one 3-4 days at
Exactly.
a time. Correct.
So the general rule that I give is, let's say, and there's no order. If you say, okay, I managed to take out these 4, there's no order in which one to try reintroducing. Let's say your hallmark symptom is acne and headaches, for example. So then you say, okay, I'm going to start with eggs. So I'll tell patients, eat 1 to 2 eggs per day for a maximum of 3 days. If by the end of the 4th day you haven't gotten any symptom return that's really clear, like you didn't get one of your big migraines or you didn't break out into your cystic acne, then chances are you're good with eggs. Keep it in your diet and now move on to the next food.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Now, sugar, of course, that would also be, that's one I guess you assume people have to just take out of their diet, right?
I would assume that we're in 2017, and with all the research that's out there, it's very clear that refined sugars are a problem. So when I first see a patient, I require them to fill out a 3-day diet diary. And if it's identified in there that there are those refined foods, then they do walk out with a handout about their sugar alternatives. And that is sort of more for long-term health as well. And then in terms of the food piece, we could also touch upon the pro-inflammatory foods. I don't know if we have time for that today.
Yeah.
But I find that a lot of people with inflammatory issues, whether it's headaches, joint pain is a big one, eczema, those can be very triggered by the inflammatory foods known as the nightshades.
Right, I've heard that a lot.
Right.
Do you want to list some of them?
Yeah, so you've got, unfortunately, they tend to be the harvest time of the year, kind of like right now. And it's really interesting. I've learned over the years that when you listen to patients' symptoms that wax and wane, right, sometimes it's better than all of a sudden out of the blue it comes out of nowhere. I remember I was working with a patient with rheumatoid arthritis, and her worst time was end of summer, early fall. And what we basically, were able to map out on a timeline is that she loved the eggplant, peppers, tomatoes, and strawberries that all happen at the end of the summer. And so she would eat basically just those foods every day, and her inflammatory process would really flare up.
And what is it exactly that creates that inflammation with those good foods? Like you said, some foods are good for us and yet they create such a problem.
Exactly. So with the nightshades, there's solicin, so there's a particular compound in it that can be a really big immune trigger. And I find that in about 70, believe it, that's quite a large number, about 70% of patients who deal with osteoarthritis have a real big impact when they can identify foods in the nightshade list that are a problem for them. So if we're gearing more towards that, then I'll get them to remove the nightshade foods for 4 weeks, assess how they're doing, and then reintroduce one at a time. And the list does include potatoes. Yeah.
Sweet potatoes too?
No, sweet potatoes are fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's on their list of what as their replacement.
That was a treat for me this weekend. I had a white potato. It was very exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, now also with regards to all the food, common allergens, corn. What about corn?
In my, what I explain to patients is, so for any of you who've come to see me, you leave here for the better, for the worse, with a lot of information. So the better part is that you're equipped. The worst part is that it can seem a bit overwhelming, but we really try to work with you and break it down. But on my gluten-free list, I include corn to remove.
Right.
So when I'm doing a gluten-free trial with a patient, I'll give them a handout that says the farine, the flours and the grains to avoid, and the replacements. And in the one to avoid, you've got your wheat, your spelt, your kamut as a first trial, and there's also the corn, just because it's such a common trigger and it's so much found in sort of gluten-free foods that a lot of the times people will come back if they don't take out the corn and they don't necessarily feel that much better.
Good point.
So with all the years of experience, I just get them to take it out, and then when we get improvement, then they can try putting stuff back in. Because the aim isn't for this to be torturous or for you to be deprived. The aim is to find out what foods are you encountering on a regular basis that your immune system is not happy with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And corn could be also very highly GMO. So
exactly.
That's another.
Yeah, so you've got your wheat, your soy, your corn, your cotton. These are all highly genetically modified.
What was the last thing?
Cotton.
Cotton?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah, I'm thinking, okay.
you don't eat the cotton, but women use cotton tampons.
Oh.
And yeah, and what's genetically modified is the main ingredient that's a problem is glyphosate. It's a known neurotoxin. The use of it is banned in certain countries, including Sri Lanka, because of incredibly high cancer rates in the farmers.
Really?
Yeah, so that's why when I'm talking about GMOs, I always include cotton, because women will use cotton in a very intimate place where there's a lot of absorption.
Yes.
Right? So
And cotton balls. On
exactly.
the face.
Exactly.
Wow, that's good to know. I didn't know that.
So side tangent.
Wow, very side. And there was also, with regards to just if somebody doesn't have all these issues, would you recommend doing this elimination for the 4 weeks just to...
If you're symptom-free, if you basically get through your day feeling good, your moods are balanced, you have good stable energy, you don't have aches and pains, you don't have a significant family history of cardiovascular disease and all of that, I don't see the need, and I don't see the need of restricting certain foods. As a general recommendation, even if you tolerate wheat, you do want to move towards a lower wheat diet. So what happens is, I think, generally speaking, society has taken a step of where they're like, okay, white's not so good, so now I'm going to use brown. But the brown is pretty much all wheat. So we need to sort of take the next step in really diversifying our grains and getting a lot more of the ancient grains. So getting in the quinoa and the millet, using oats, all of that, if you don't have a problem with grains.
Right. So a lot of people I know say for weight loss, they look towards doing an elimination. Mm-hmm. They also, though, with what I find, a lot of people that do have, put on weight over the years, a lot of times it comes along with aches and pains.
Yeah.
Like they don't realize that there's a, kind of a mesh between the two as we're gaining weight more easily.
Yeah.
Usually there could be some other underlying, maybe a problem with the sugars, with insulin. Mm-hmm. So is that, again, something that you would recommend then just...
Because the idea with the elimination diet isn't just about, like I mentioned before, depriving and removing all of these things. It's taking the foods out, but then working with someone who can give you the structure of what a balanced diet looks like. So a lot of people benefit from an elimination diet, not because they're starving, but because they take out potential food intolerances, which will create a lot of bloating and water retention. So I have a lot of patients who'll say, within a week, I just lost like 10 pounds of water, right? So they were having a hard time taking off their rings. At the end of the day, their socks, you could see the elastic around their ankles. You can see the puffiness around their eyes. And so that's a really good indicator that some of those foods were triggers for them. And then when we work on an elimination diet, I give patients, the structure of the protein protein that they need to eat and the leafy green cooked vegetables that they need to eat, and then where to get their different nutrients. So they're also moving towards a better, generally structured diet that will help with keeping blood sugar more balanced.
So that's very good. Yeah. Now, when we talk about the term toxicity, like we're not going to talk about environmental today. We're talking more about foods.
Yeah.
So foods that, we're exposed to, pesticides, herbicides, antibiotics, that kind of thing. So, and there's also this controversy. People say, well, organic, we're not really sure.
Yeah.
How do you feel? Like, what's your recommendation with that?
So this is my sort of soapbox moment about this. We are at a point in evolutionary development where the average Canadian is exposed to about 100,000 toxins per day. Okay?
Jeez.
And it's an ever-increasing number. So this idea of we don't need to detox, toxins don't exist, our bodies can handle it, is a wrong message. Yes, we have an intrinsic detoxification mechanism in the liver, which is a really good one because it's normal for us to be exposed to toxins. The planet, in its natural environment, unaffected by all that we've created, does create toxins. We are 10 times more bacteria than we are human. All of those bacteria create toxins. So that's why we have a detox system.
Right.
But the analogy I give to patients is like the glass and the glass overflowing, right? So if you keep loading your system with toxins, eventually the glass is going to overflow. And when you're in the overflow is when you start feeling bad and you start having symptoms.
Right.
So if we can decrease the contents of the glass by minimizing your toxin load, then that's an advantage. If we can make your glass taller by supporting detoxification with plant supplements, hydrotherapy, saunas, coffee enemas, colonics, whatever it is, then again, better. That's a great thing to do. So when I do a detox program with a patient, they get like a few pages of an appendix that includes using, kind of chemical-free or reduced chemical products for your house cleaning and your personal hygiene, like the Arbonne stuff. But it also includes trying to move towards organic food. There is nothing perfect.
Right.
Organic food does not exist in a bubble, but the statistic is that it's 2/3 less laden filled with toxins than non-organic food. Which is great. So if you're looking at wanting to decrease what you're filling up in your glass, then that can really be a useful approach. And in Montreal, we have to respect the weather diversity in terms of we don't always have access to it. But from June or May to October, you've got a lot of really great markets close by where you can get local organic food.
Yeah, which is really good.
Yeah.
Question about the alkaline and acidity in the body.
So obviously, if your body, the way I see it is when your body's more acidic, it's more inflammatory, and that inflammation is the driving factor of all chronic disease. So you want to look at what is going to reduce that inflammatory load, right? So healthy diet is step one. Emotional health and decreasing stress is really important. Exercising, getting sleep, all of these things are really important. Massages, definitely. I went for one yesterday. It was great. It did me a world of good. It did a world of good.
Yeah, it's really good.
So the idea is that by making these changes, that there is the overall benefit to it.
Good.
Yeah.
Now, I've had questions about lemon, lime, being that it's, alkaline in the stomach.
Right.
And why is that? So people often say, well, an orange isn't. Why is a lemon?
I think in terms of the actual bringing it down to the chemistry, I can't really answer it, right? So I think the idea is that if you have a cut on your skin, or if you have GERD reflux, like burning in the esophagus, and you put lemon on those things, it's going to hurt, right? So that's more of the acidifying factor. But I think some kind of chemical reaction happens in the stomach with the stomach acid that actually helps it to being more of a neutralizing factor. But anything that's really bitter, like lemon or sour, is just going to benefit the liver. Right. So I don't see a problem with adding lemon to your water. If you have a lot of dental issues where your enamel is wearing down, then you might need to back off. on that because it's still in the mouth.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I heard too that, and again, this part of this, the reason why I like doing this is we hear a lot of things, so it's kind of trying to put things together as like what's fact, what's fiction.
Yeah.
Lemon, what I had read somewhere is brushing your teeth before you have lemon, so that if you do have lemon water in the morning, it's more beneficial to brush your teeth first and not after. Any truth to that?
If you're dealing with a lot of inflammatory oral health problems, then I would back off on using a lot of the lemon.
Okay, but a little bit.
Yeah, and instead you can maybe use something like ginger.
Yeah, ginger.
Right, which can be an alternative.
Right.
And that doesn't have that effect on the mouth.
Okay, ginger and warm water, grated into a shake.
Yeah.
All that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah.
And the last thing I just want to mention, because I just did it, I just went into the infrared sauna, and I absolutely love it, and it's beneficial just anytime, but it's even more so when you're doing an elimination or detox.
Yeah.
And how does it differ from
the other kinds?
Yeah.
The infrared sauna is really particular in that the infrared waves penetrate about 2-3 inches into the skin, and by doing that, you're really increasing your circulation and you're increasing sweating because your core body temperature is raising really quickly. And so the sweat, you can actually see the difference versus going into like a hammam, which is a steam type of sauna, which can be really lovely, but you're sweating because your body's responding right away to the high temperature. And so the sweat is a lot more watery. When you're using infrared sauna, you go in at about 25 to 30 degrees and you stay in there for ideally about 45 minutes and work your way up to 55 degrees. So it's like you're slowly cooking. And as you cook, you start to sweat to regulate your body temperature, but the sweat is very oily and you can see the difference. And so what you're doing is that it has a deeper detoxification effect because it's helping to promote the release of fat-soluble toxins, which are the bigger problems like your insecticides and pesticides and lead and mercury. You'd be really surprised how many of us are walking around with really high loads of this stuff.
Yeah. Yes, you had tested me years ago, and lead was an issue. That's not fun.
No.
So I'm just trying to see here. Sorry, missed the phone. Okay. I just thought maybe there were questions. I need new glasses because I can't read with my glasses. So we'll get on to other topics as we go. If you guys have anything that you'd like to know a little bit more about, we'll be back maybe 2 weeks or...
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for listening. Thank you again, Paola.
Thank you.